Sports Day. As a drug-crazed anarchist, Manus didn't feel relaxed about going to the school sports day. He wouldn't be at ease in the crowd for a start. All those people, straight people, mostly absolutely no illegal drugs people, or even if they had done drugs in some part of their life, they were still straights. They believed the TV view of the world. They lie about the freedom of the press. They lie about political parties acting independently from corporate dictates. They lie about the free democratic West. And yeah, Manus would not feel at ease with so many straights. But when he had to, he could handle them. The real cause of his unease lay in the fact that Jan, the mother of his child Sharifa, would also be at the school sports day. Meeting Jan in public was always problematic for Manus. She would pretend open communication and friendly camaraderie. In reality, there was a complete absence of open communication and friendly camaraderie, and Manus would find it difficult to pretend. Jan's duplicity seemed to reflect and fit in perfectly with the norms of mainstream society. Normal mainstream Western media had to pretend ignorance of the brutalities and injustices of the wars fought on the fringes of corporate empire to ensure the continued advantages the West has long enjoyed. When the Western press mentioned the wars, it talked of spreading democracy, and seldom, if ever, acknowledged that the West does not send its armies into oil-rich countries to help the people of those countries, or that the only type of government that is ever going to be allowed to rule in these countries is one that serves the corporations. Pretending the exact opposite of what is happening seemed woven into daily life, like it was natural. Jan seemed to believe duplicity was good for children too, a necessary lesson in their formative years to help them prepare for life in a society where duplicity, hypocrisy, and lies were such an integral part. Manus just couldn't get it. Weren't you supposed to teach them to see through this type of stuff? Still, Manus wanted to see Sharif on her sports day, and he figured it would be okay. He could just stand on his own. The sports day wasn't held at the school. It was held in some large, beautiful grounds close by. Manus tried to remember his own school sports day, but couldn't. Maybe he had mitched off school in those days. He'd never been into sports. Drugs could be said to have limited his life in that respect. From his pre-teen years, his entertainment had all been drug-centred. His understanding of football leagues was that they were organised by the ruling class to keep people distracted from organising a better situation for themselves. His understanding of all modern sports and the entertainment business in general went along connected or similar lines. Funnily enough, he wouldn't have put drugs in that category, at least not when he was younger. Drugs were the reality revealers. Drugs showed you what life was really all about. A discredited theory he knew. Drugs, even the alternative attitudes and beliefs of his early drug-using days, could be and were commodified, bought and sold for profit like everything else. Che Guevara's image was used to sell rebel pizzas, and drugs were just more big business. Maybe it was just all those drugs that fucked his memory, but even if there was any school sports day for Manus as a kid, then he probably would have been somehow to the side of it, not really part. He skirted the crowd now at Sharifa's sports day and he got told by the headmistress that he had to stand behind a line that he had crossed. She was very nice about it. Manus didn't feel bad complying. He noticed his voice though, very humble, quiet and respectful. His normally coarse, rough northern tones had been smoothed out and toned down. His voice was on its best behaviour. He didn't want to stand out or have any trouble. He wanted to hug his daughter on his weekday, see her at her sports day. This was a big part of her world, and he wanted to be in it for her. He would have kept her at home and educated her himself, but her mother wouldn't let him. God, she had almost succeeded in stopping him from having anything to do with his daughter's upbringing, by claiming in court that he was psychologically damaging Schaefer with his radical views. Had Jan succeeded, it would probably have killed him, and severely damaged Sharifa, who was so attached to her father. It was something he could never get his head around. Jan was capable of refusing to see the damage it would have done Sharifa. She could persuade herself that what suited her Having Manus completely wiped out of her life would also be best for Sharifa. Manus couldn't get his head around it. As it turned out, the Judicial Service decreed that Manus should have 72 hours custody and Jan got 96. She got the weekdays, he got every weekend. When Sharifa started school, Manus would pick her up on a Friday and leave her back on a Monday. So school wasn't really a part of their lives together. School was really Jan's part, Monday to Friday. He caught sight of Sharifa across the field, and catching sight of him, she smiled and blew him a knuckle kiss, and they both raised their fists in the air at each other. The fist in the air seemed an unacceptable gesture, like an obsolete and unsavoury reminder of the 60s slogan, part of the people. Still, Manus raised his clenched fist to his daughter, and she raised hers to him. He wondered on his little girl. What would her world be like in 10 or 20 years? What would Sharifa be like in 10 years? Or 20? School wasn't bad, it was one of the best around. An educate together school. It wasn't all beat the rest and be the best. And although Manus still felt a little different, as anyone who has spent most of their lives on drugs, living on the fringes of society does when surrounded by straights, still he didn't really feel too ill at ease. He wouldn't have much in common with most of the parents and teachers, but he wouldn't have much problems with them either. He sat in the grass and read a book, Miseducation by Chomsky. Patricia came over and asked him to join her, and he said he might join her later, but really he didn't want to. Jan would come into Patricia's group, and other friends of Jan's who had taken her part in trying to separate Manus and his daughter. Jan, never keen on communicating with Manus, now contacted him by phone or text when she required him to do something with Sharifa or wanted to take Sharifa on one of his days. The vacuum of real two-way communication often seemed to turn the isolated messages into bullets, one shot at the other. Manus feared these skirmishes. He feared Jan building them into a righteous war against a barbaric, monstrous thing that she would name Manus. Manus sat in his own and read his book. Paul came over. Paul and Patricia had broken up, but Patricia had never demonized Paul or tried to take his children from him, so Paul and Patricia could still sit with each other and not have to pretend much of anything. Personally, Manus had little problems with Paul, but they were only little. Paul figured he was from the E generation, which he said had been all hedonistic, with no learning, no altered perceptions, no alternative notions. Paul was a nice liberal guy. He was trying to finish a postgraduate course and hope to get himself a good job. What else could a man hope for? He listened to Brit News to find out what was really happening in the world. Just trying to get him to engage in any way, in any questioning of the system that he was hoping to do quite well out of, was strictly for conspiracy theorists, throwback communists and lunatics. It was like the corporation's public relations people had done such a good job in his generation. They were content with their lot in the best, most evolved system there was, and the march of progress, democracy and freedom was in full swing. Paul said he felt optimistic. Manus had been feeling optimistic, but looking at Paul, his optimism was fading. Then Jan came over. "Hello, Manus," she said. It was all a big joke for her. The constant refusal to communicate in private, and now the big, friendly, open public display. "Hello, Jan," he said. She offered him coffee. He said no thanks. Paul left, and Jan started talking to another parent. The other woman was talking about a party Sharif had been to, and how all the parents had come to collect the children at once, and how some of them could have been late, and then there wouldn't have been such a bottleneck of parents and children in the hall. Jan, ever the bright young thing, was laughing. "Well, at least we were late." She was talking about Manus and her as though they did things together. It was all show for Jan. The reality didn't seem to matter. It was just how it looked that counted. Jan and the other parent were stood practically on top of where Manus was sitting. He felt crowded. He wanted to be away from Jan. He wanted to tell the woman, "It's a lie, it's a sham, we don't do anything in Mullen Corporation." Jan tried to take me out of Sharifa's life completely, but failed. And now anything I do with my daughter, I do in spite of Jan's efforts to separate us. But there was Jan smiling and laughing beside him, the great communicator and cooperator. Manus got up and moved away. He felt awkward now, his reality at odds with the one Jan was presenting. It made him feel a little mad. Jan was persuasive with her bright, merry little laughs. The reality she pretended, this open, honest, communicating, cooperating reality she was pretending to, would be believed by the woman. He felt awkward. His stomach was nodding. His shoulders seemed to be caving in on his chest. He was a weird outsider now, one who understood and experienced a different reality than Jan presented and the woman believed. He saw Sharifa again across the field. He saw as she saw him floundering, alone, ill at ease. Manus was sorry for Sharifa. Sorry her father knew no one but her mother's friends. Manus had no real problem standing alone. He was well used to it, but he felt sorry somehow for his daughter that her father was in this situation. There was a parents' race, which Jan ran in laughing. Paul called for Manus to join, but by now Manus felt too alienated. He wanted people to know about the lie Jan was telling. He didn't want to take part in the lie. So there he was, the alienated, awkward, ill at ease old man. And there was Jan, perfectly at ease amongst her fellows. It just wasn't good for him to be around her. It never was. After the races, he got to hug his daughter on a weekday. Sharifa was hurt by seeing her parents together. The lack of real communication, the fear, the contempt. Things like that are not really hidden from children. You can camouflage them, but kids see through the camouflage. You can teach a child to try and fool itself, not see what it feels. You can teach a child to live with duplicity, hypocrisy, and lies. Seem to be the normal way of things. Like saying America was in Iraq for any reason other than control of its valuable oil reserves. But Manus didn't want to teach his child that. Manus kissed his daughter goodbye and left feeling more depressed, frustrated, and sad than he had for a while.